let's go down the line. I want you all to briefly introduce yourselves as you answer this first question. Oliver Darcy used to be my colleague at CNN. Then he quit last summer, and he is now on his own running Status. So I'm going to ask you all this. This is the first question. Oliver, first to you. How do you make money now? Let's just cut to the chase. What's the business model? What's the game plan?
Yeah. No, for us, the business model, and well, one, I guess you already introduced me. But
No.
I used to work
yourself.
at CNN. I covered the news media and the media at large. And I now, last 8 months ago, I left CNN and I found Status, which is covering the same topics each night, 6 nights a week. And we survive from reader subscriptions. That's how we make the bulk of our revenue. Reader subscriptions, a little bit of advertising money, but I think probably over 95% of it, it's all based on the readers.
Yeah. Julianne Escobedo Shepherd, you are the founder, writer, and editor of Hearing Things. So that means you're everything, right?
Co-founder, writer, and editor.
Oh, okay, all right.
Did
okay.
everything all at once.
So what is Hearing Things, and how do you make money?
Hearing Things is an independent worker-owned music and culture website, and we make money. We started out with an investor, but now we make money through subscriptions, events, live shows, and we've only been around for 4 months, so hopefully, some more streams in the future.
Sounds
5
pretty
months,
diversified
actually.
already, though. 4 months.
We're working on it.
Working
5
on
months, actually.
Wow.
But yeah.
All right. Marisa Kabas in the middle, writer and reporter of the Handbasket. What is the Handbasket, and how do you make money?
The Handbasket is an independent news site. That's at least what the New York Times called it the other day.
Ooh, great humble brag there. Nice way of working that in.
And I make money through reader subscriptions. I should probably diversify, but that's it for now. And occasionally people who send me some money on Venmo because they're feeling generous.
Donations.
Yeah, right, that's the word.
But you're not non-for-profit. You are trying to make a profit.
Oh, sure,
I think it's an interesting distinction, right? You think about membership models or donations, but the goal is to make this a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't have any corporate backers or billionaires funneling money to me. It's just the goodness of readers' hearts.
And that's a big part of your ad, as we'll talk about. It's a big part of your appeal. Absolutely. All right, Nick Pinto, a founder, worker, owner, and journalist at Hellgate. What does worker owner mean? What is Hellgate, and how do you make money?
Like some of these other publications, the journalists at Hellgate own the publication. Nobody else is calling the shots there. So coming up on 3 years ago, a bunch of New York City local journalists, myself included, got together and founded Hellgate, and we cover New York City. We're a local news website, and we make our money also primarily through subscriptions.
And last but not least, John Ourand of Puck. You're a sports correspondent at Puck. You have a newsletter. What is Puck and how do you make money?
Like everybody else, this is a common theme here, subscription. The way forward is to make community and have them pay for your content. We have a very firewall that's very, very difficult to get past. Like, you need to subscribe to it. And the essence of Puck is that it's not really a news site. It's more of like a news and analysis site. And we go into certain markets. Like the first one that we launched was in Hollywood with Matt Bellany. And he's an authoritative voice in Hollywood. And there wasn't a thought of like, okay, let's get him and then let's bring like 5 other journalists and really cover Hollywood. It was like, let's just use Matt and have Matt write, twice a week or 3 times a week from Hollywood. And he is the authoritative voice. And then we just went into different sectors from there. DC, we have, if you're into fashion, we have a fashion newsletter. We have an art newsletter. They wanted to launch a sports newsletter, sports business. I had been in Sports Business Journal for about 2 decades, and so we ended up working out a deal. I've been there for about a year now, and it works out pretty well.
And you're working at I think of it as a digital magazine. Lots of star writers. Nick, you're part of a collective. I think it's fair to say the other 3, you're kind of on your more individual oriented. Is that fair to say? Like thinking about Hearing Things, for example.
Well, Hearing Things, we started with 5 of us.
Okay.
So we're more of a collective, yeah. But it's different from being in a giant corporation, for instance, where you have 100 coworkers.
Yeah.
So.
Oliver, what's easier so far for you? Institution or individual?
Well, they both have pros and cons.
Yeah.
Right.
And I say that, let's just, I came back to CNN because you quit. Like, you and I used to work together.
I created a voice for Brian.
We should explain it to people. Like,
I
we
gave
used
Brian
to write,
his job.
Yeah, we used to write a newsletter together. I got fired. Oliver had to do it by himself. Then he quit, and I came back. So we've talked about this. I know your answer, I think, but I want the students and everybody else to know, what's harder, what's better?
I think there's a room for both.
He's happier now.
There's room for both, and I think the world needs big news organizations like the CNN and the Associated Press and the New York Times and so on and so forth. But working at an organization that large does, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and you don't have the freedom you do when you're calling the shots and independent. So now that I'm independent and running status, I get to very much control the brand. Whether it's what kind of graphic design we use, or whether it's even me coming to this panel. No one has to approve it. And generally at CNN, if you're on a panel like this, it has to go through a PR spokesperson, and they have to say, you can go. And so there's just vastly more freedom, I think, being independent.
Brian, what I hear is that he's happier now.
That's what I've heard too. Marisa, what is it like for you? I think a big part of your pitch to consumers, to readers, to subscribers, is that you're not part of a big institution, that you're not backed by a billionaire, as you said a moment ago. Why does that resonate with audiences, and how do you take advantage of that?
I think that it speaks to audiences because they know that there's no one lording anything over me. There's no bottom line to meet. There's no corporate line. I pursue stories because they're interesting to me and because I care about them. And I think that comes through in the writing. And the biggest, I think, advantage of being on my own and not having to run things through anyone else is that I can just publish a story when it's ready to go. And that's really come in handy. And in the past, when I've held on to things and pitched it to other places and waited to get approval from someone else, I missed the boat and I didn't get the scoop. But now I get the scoops because I'm my own boss and I know when the story is ready to go.
Nick, is that true at a place like Hellgate as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And I would say that in addition to, people have mentioned the editorial difference of not having bosses and being able to make your own judgments and move quickly on them without having them second-guessed by people who aren't necessarily as close to the story as you are. There is also a business advantage, which is our subscription dollars need to pay for the journalists doing the work. They do not need to pay for multiple tiers of executive layers who are doing that second guessing. And so at a time when the media business is in tumult or free fall, or however we want to talk about it right now, being lean in that way and really making sure that what money you are able to scrounge up is going to producing journalism, I think is an advantage for independence.
Was it strange for you, John, coming out of 20 years at a institution, a brand name in the sports business world, to then go to Puck, which is maybe well established in some circles, but is an upstart, is a scrappy upstart? Did some sources become more skeptical with you? Is it harder in some ways to break stories? Did it become easier? What was that like?
It's a little bit harder because I used to, at Sports Business Journal, it was a 24-hour website, so I would get information and I would get it right up. Well, at Puck, we don't value breaking news as much. Like, I come out on Monday nights and on Thursday nights. And so anything that happens outside of those nights, the idea is that we're trying to build a community of sports fans or sports business fans. And if something happens on Wednesday, then maybe I'll write about it on Thursday and people will want to read my sort of reported opinion on what happened on Wednesday. Typically, I try to break news and spin it forward, but sometimes that does happen. But I find it be a lot harder to break news just because of the way that we're set up.
Conversely, were some people more eager, some sources, more readers more eager to have you at a new place, because it's a buzzy startup, and I wonder if there's like a halo that comes from that.
When I was, I had a kitchen cabinet when I was thinking about leaving, and half the people were like, "Don't go," because everything was sort of I was really comfortable at SBJ. I had a lot of autonomy at SBJ. I could kind of do what I wanted to, and people liked that, and they didn't know what this puck thing was, and they saw Matt Bellany again. I keep bringing him up, but he's sort of my role model a bit at Puck, and he writes with a poison pen. He kills people, and we don't kill people at SBJ, and certainly not in the trade. So people were a little bit nervous and skeptical about when I would get there and do that. Yeah.
But I think the point about Bellany, I think Oliver, you fit into this category also. Marisa, I think lately all of your scoops about Doge and the federal government make you fit into this category. Becoming a brand name, a larger-than-life figure, a byline people notice. I was at a conference yesterday in South Carolina, and I hear this top Netflix executive speaking, whispering to somebody, and she says, Matt Bellany, he knows everything. Like, to have that reputation of knowing everything opens even more doors. It gets you even further. But John, you used the word comfortable, that you were comfortable at your old place. Oliver, to others on the panel, does that resonate with you, that it can be comfortable to not be in an entrepreneurial mode, to not be on your own, having to scrape for every subscriber? Does that resonate with any of you?
Yeah, I feel like this is sort of a classic story where you can either be resenting the bad decisions of the people who are making decisions on your behalf, or you can be sweating bullets figuring out how to make those decisions yourselves. Yeah, right. And so we've all chosen the latter, and I think I like it better.
Yeah, I think one of the most difficult things about starting a worker-owned publication is realizing the point when you realize you're actually also starting a business, which is, at least the five of us at Hearing Things, we didn't get into journalism to be business people. And so learning to do those sorts of things, like even just basic things like having media insurance, or actually having media insurance was so hard to figure out, but we found it, and it
tell
can be really.
People why that matters.
That matters in case anyone decides to sue us for anything that we publish. We are covered, and we can indemnify ourselves, which felt very important in this climate, but also. Two of us had worked at Gawker Media, so we have a lot of PTSD from that experience. So we were, we cover music and culture, but you never know. But regardless, yes, learning the business aspects and being responsible for your own mistakes, like Nick said, that's a growing pain that is exciting.
All right, let's dig into the pain a little bit, okay? What are the other discomforts that come from going out on your own?
I'd say, just kind of touching on that last question too, there's no safety net. There's no one to look back, that has your back really. You're on your own, and so that means that you have to produce content pretty much as often as possible that people are willing to pay for. Because if you don't, you'll lose subscribers, they'll churn out, or you won't gain new subscribers. And so that's a problem. So I think a lot of legacy news organizations actually, the comfort sometimes results in reporters not delivering what they could deliver if they were really pushed out on their own, if they're in the bitter cold and they have to build their own tent to survive. There's no choice but to do it. But when you're in a nice house and you have a room there, regardless of whether you produce a really good story that day, you might feel like you want to do some Amazon shopping in the morning, and then you kind of make some calls. And I just think that happens at a lot of corporations. Whereas, for me, every day, I'm like, what scoop can I land today? What scoop can we clear across the desk? I've heard this, let's pursue this. There's no time, and I want to deliver as much as possible, because at the end of the day, I'm now directly working for readers, and I feel like they're paying for a product. I want to deliver on it, but also, there's something lingering in the back of your head that maybe all this goodness will just disappear if I don't deliver. And so I think that added pressure actually makes me a better journalist, but it does add pressure to the equation.
Do you all relate to that? Marisa, do you hustle more?
Well, it's interesting that this idea of it disappearing, I actually feel more secure in this job
Ooh, great. Disagree with Oliver. Let's get this going.
than I have in the past because, first of all, with subscriptions, readers are mostly committing to an annual subscription. So once they're locked in, you have them for at least a year, and of course you need to keep proving your worth. But that is a nice runway to kind of get them hooked into your publication. And also, there's not going to be some cliff that I fall off tomorrow where all of my subscriptions are canceled and I'm suddenly high and dry.
Or if that happens, we'll all have bigger problems.
Right.
Yeah. If the economy gets that bad.
Yeah.
Right.
But I feel like the thing I love about this job and the reason I'm so happy in it is that I'm not getting fired tomorrow. I'm not dreading an email from a boss or from a VP at this big company saying, hey, can you come to the HR office at 10 a.m. tomorrow? That's never going to happen. I feel very much in control of my own fate. And I also feel like I hustle to the point that I think I need to. I feel like I've gotten to know my readers well enough at this point to know what they expect of me and how often I need to publish. So in some ways, yes, I do answer to them and I want to make them happy and proud and all that stuff. I also feel like they're paying for this because they like what I do. They like what I write. And so I don't necessarily need to prove myself every single day because they're here.
Right. Nick, do you feel more comfortable because of that subscription idea that people have signed up?
I agree with everything that Marisa said. I mean, I think an interesting thing about this panel is that some of us are out there as more or less like solo operators, which is like an enormous responsibility, and I think it carries a lot of advantages with it. I don't think I could hack that. I am very grateful to be part of a team, and so I think it's a question for like the future of journalism and what sort of models are going to work. Of like that, we have seen like a lot of trends of people of sort of like an atomization of the newsroom and people figuring out how to I can do this better on my own, and so like it's an interesting question of like is that how well does that work? Are there ways to like reconstitute the scattered stars of journalism into a newsroom where I really
do you have a physical newsroom?
Like 2 days a week, we're like squatting in someone else's
Okay.
kind of.
Puck has a newsroom right near here.
They call it South Tribeca. It's right next to the World Trade Center. Deep South Tribeca.
Right.
It's funny that we're sitting right next to each other because I'm the same way. It was no risk at all for me to go to Puck because Puck has a bunch of editors that read over the copy. John Kelly used to be at Vanity Fair, and he sort of oversees that editorial there. We hired Sarah Personette as she was a former CEO of Twitter that's out there sort of doing deals. I mean, the whole part of Puck is that, it's journalists owned. So like when journalists come in, they get a piece of it. But
Which means a little bit of equity. You own a little bit of Puck because
a
you
little
work
bit
there.
of equity, yeah.
I mean, that's one of the commonalities up here. I think worker owned is a phrase one of you used earlier. And I think that's a helpful, way to think about this. Obviously, Oliver, you're worker owned. You have an editor you recently brought on board.
Yes.
And I think you
I stole your editor.
You did steal my editor from CNN, and he owns a little bit also. So the idea is all of these, in one form or another, am I right, are worker owned.
By the way, a fawning profile in WSJ too.
Well, thank you.
Tell us about that, Oliver. What happened after you were profiled in the Wall Street Journal?
It apparently angered Rupert Murdoch quite a bit.
It angered Rupert Murdoch so much that what did they do to the article?
I didn't report this. They desurfaced it, which is
Breaker Media reported the article was taken off the homepage because of the owners upset.
Yeah, Rupert's not a fan.
But what does that tell us about institutional, old school, billionaire-owned media versus what you do? That tells us something, doesn't it?
I think a little bit. I mean, obviously Rupert Murdoch as the owner it's his prerogative. If he wants to take a story down and doesn't like it, he owns the paper. I think that the main thing for me that resonates with audiences is particularly in this moment is we're seeing a lot of major media companies buckle under political pressure. Not only media companies, but tech companies as well. You see Mark Zuckerberg, what he's doing. You see the CBS lawsuit against 60 Minutes that's probably going to be settled at some point
Right,
in
a
time.
frivolous lawsuit that Paramount might pay to go away.
You can there's a long list,
Right.
a laundry list of examples that people are seeing and saying the mainstream media, I don't like using that phrase, but the mainstream media is not doing a good job holding Trump accountable, and they're actually bending the knee in a lot of cases. And I think someone who covers the press, not now being owned or working for a corporation, but being entirely independent, gives me maximum freedom to critique the press when that happens. And so I think that the audience knows that when I'm writing, I'm not writing with anyone else's agenda in mind. And I would never do that, even when I worked at CNN. But I think not having that hanging over me has added a new sense of trust and community.
Well, there's distrust in mainstream media, right? And you're freed of that. In some ways, all of you are. The reason you're getting profiled in the Journal, the reason you're getting cited in the New York Times, one of the reasons is there's lots of journalists in those old school places that are wondering if they should go and do what you're all doing. They're wondering if they should strike it out on their own. They're wondering if Substack or Beehive, which you use, is the way forward. So what do you tell people who ask you that? What do you tell reporters, friends of yours, people in the business who wonder if they should go and do what all of you are doing? I'd love to hear answers from all of you. Like, what is the advice you give, or are there warnings you give to them? What do you say?
So I'll start by just saying, we're all in a subscription business.
Yeah.
And that's a tough business to be in.
It's hard to get people to hand over their credit card.
It is, and
right?
so you celebrate, 5 people sign up and you celebrate that, and it's just everybody here is in it for the long haul, and that's not for everybody, and it's not for people that are sort of used to being getting their stories out and easily read, and so that's I think that's one sort of red flag that I would say to people that maybe shouldn't come this route.
Let me understand that. You're saying being behind a hard paywall where people are not going to see your work unless they're paying a pretty penny, that takes some getting used to, you're saying?
Takes some getting used to. My whole career has been behind a paywall, and I'm the oldest one up here. I mean, I've been doing this for decades. So I have enough sourcing, and I have enough people that it concerns me a lot less than it would if I was a lot younger trying to go this route.
Nick, what do you say to folks at the New York Daily News or something? I should get out of this print newspaper business before it collapses altogether.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because I think what differentiates Hellgate from everyone else up here is that everyone here is speaking potentially to a national audience, and so that means that you are drawing from 300 odd million people who might be interested in what you're saying, and we're talking about New York City, so we're drawing from 8.5 million people. And so, we hear a lot from people in other cities like, hey, we like what you're doing. We kind of want to try it where we are. And we encourage them and we give them as much advice as we can. But I think it's an open question. Hellgate, it looks like early indications are Hellgate works in New York City. I think Hellgate could work in a lot of big cities. Could Hellgate work in a mid-tier small market? Open question. I don't know.
Why? Tell us briefly why.
Well, just because, because the number of people who are prepared to subscribe for local news is proportional to the population of the city, and so can you pay a staff to do the necessary work on that subscriber base? And the other thing is that Hellgate isn't just a straight news site. We're sort of drawing on an alt weekly early bloggy tradition. We're very voicey. We're very opinionated. We use bad words in headlines sometimes, and so that makes us even more niche. There's a smaller subset of people who enjoy that flavor.
By the way, that is freeing at Puck too, using foul language.
But so some people love you more for that, but it turns off others. So it's
right.
both sides, right? Marisa, I know you get people asking you, can I do what you're doing? Can I be the next Handbasket? What do you tell them?
Well, if people want to do it, they should try. I think that's sort of my message, because if I can do it, other people can do it. It's not like I was handed some special opportunity to be able to do this. But I will say that I've built this sort of over 15 years. I mean, I would say the trajectory started when I signed up for Twitter as a senior in college in 2009, and built this loyal base of people who like reading what I do, whether it was on a little Tumblr I had in 2011,
Oh, Tumblr.
or now on the Handbasket, which has thousands of subscribers. And so I do think I've really nurtured these relationships, and I've made myself a presence, whether it was on Twitter and now on Blue Sky. And so if you're not willing to put in that work, if you're not willing to engage with people and meet people where they are, and answer to people who are not your boss necessarily, like to the readers, and have more of a community, then I would say it's not for you. So I think you have to be committed to really fostering a community around your publication.
Yeah, it takes a certain constitution also, not just, connecting directly to your readership, but at least with hearing things. I mean, I've worked at, everywhere, every, major corporate, not every, but I've worked at a lot of sort of conglomerates, but I started out in alt weeklies and doing DIY, and so after a certain point it just makes sense to go back to the DIY roots. And I think that we're actually having this huge renaissance, not just with all of us, but I think there's a big desire that audiences have to hear from people directly without even if you're not capitulating to your corporate bosses, there is that umbrella feeling that you mentioned, Oliver, that maybe something's going to come down, and it inevitably does, from legal, or from a CEO who, or even sales, where something you've said conflicts with a cover story that is going to make a publicist mad or whatever. And I think at a certain point, it just, you just kind of have to go back to the roots.
Some of us love our corporate bosses.
Yeah, I'm not slamming. I mean, I still write for those legacy publications sometimes, but there is a huge difference in approach and audience, and if you value that, then versus valuing something else, then, yeah.
Well, when I think of it as an ecosystem, Oliver, you and I have talked about this. When you were starting Status, I was linking over to you, you were linking over to me. We were helping each other. It doesn't have to be, even though I get jealous when you land scoops, it doesn't have to be all one or the other. It's not either or. This is about creating, I think, a media universe that's hopefully got a lot more diversity and a lot more options for people, because there are more startups, there are more, shingles, whatever you want to call them. There's more options for readers and subscribers.
There is.
How's that for positivity?
Well, I'll be negative now.
Okay, this is how it usually goes with us.
Yeah, Brian's a positive one. I think people, I think independent media is obviously incredibly valuable in this moment. I do worry to some extent that people are seeing a lot of New York Times stories or journal stories or whatever about a new profile on someone who's gone independent and made a lot of money or whatever. And they think, because I get a lot of calls. I get a lot of calls from people, and they say, how do I do what you're doing? Yeah. And I think they think it might be somewhat of a get rich quick scheme, and it's not. It's actually incredibly difficult. I work 100+ hours a week at least. Pretty much every day at every time I'm doing something for work. There's no logging off for me.
You hit send tonight at 6:17 p.m.
As I was on the subway, I was working on it, and then I got here. Yeah. And I'll go home, and I'm sure I'm getting texts right now. I'm sure there's some angry PR people, or there's something going on. There's customer service emails to
You're the customer
respond.
Service guy? You're the
John and I?
Yeah, you're the customer service.
So it's a lot of work, and I'm not sure, going to the constitution of it, everyone wants to even do that. Some people might want a 9-to-5 job, and I don't think it's a get-rich-quick scheme. I think actually, as John was saying, growing a subscriber base is incredibly challenging. It's a slow burn. There's not like a overnight, switch that happens and you're rich. And online fandoms too, I would stress, do not translate into paying subscribers. Yeah. It's just not the way it works. I think, and I don't know, I'm curious what everyone else would say, but I think original information, exclusive information that is behind a paywall, that tantalizes readers over and over and over again, is what converts what I see converting people to paid subscribers. It's generally not analysis. There's a lot of hot takes on the internet for free. You can swipe on TikTok or go on X or wherever you get your information, and that's free. And so sometimes people pay for analysis and if you're an authoritative voice, but generally I think what converts subscribers is exclusive information that they have to pay for.
Anyone disagree?
Well,
Great. Tell us.
I disagree on the edges there.
You're an authoritative voice too, so when you write about sports, I think people know your name.
Yeah, and that's what Puck does. They go after the sort of authoritative voices. So for us, breaking news doesn't bring subscription. So when I started at Puck, my first break was I was there for 2 days and I was already feeling anxious about not doing anything, and I broke the story about the Baltimore Orioles sale. Like they sold the team, and it was great. Like everybody picked it up. It was a really good way sort of to announce myself. And John Kelly was like, "Hey, that was great. If you do that every week, that's great. But just so you know, like none of those people are gonna stick long term. Those are people that are like just subscribed, and it's like, oh, he's not writing about the Orioles every day. All right, forget it, and we're out. So long term, it is for us much more about sort of an analysis and putting things into perspective."
And Marisa, you were thinking a little differently also?
Yeah, for me, it's weird because I didn't start this as a breaking news site. That was not my intention whatsoever. It was a lot of essays, analysis, reflections, a lot of personal stuff. But the thing that has driven the most subscriptions has been scoops. And having big scoops is what convinced me to do this full time. I had a scoop in the summer of 2023 when this small newspaper in Kansas was raided by the police. And I just picked up the phone and I called the owner of the newspaper and I asked what happened, and I ended up finding out that the newspaper had been investigating the chief of police, and that was part of why they raided the newspaper. And it was my first big drive of subscriptions where I saw a huge uptick in a short amount of time. So when Oliver was saying that, it can't happen overnight, the last few months have actually been very transformative for the Handbasket and for me. I had a huge scoop about the federal funding from the Office of Management and Budget. And actually things did change overnight. It went from, kind of a, doing okay, getting by kind of thing to a successful business. And so I wouldn't say it's get rich quick.
Get rich really slowly?
It's slow until it's not. If you hit on something that people really want. And I've been able to maintain that and then continue steady growth from there.
I used to, when I was a blogger years ago, I used to think about it as a snowball going down the hill, creating its own momentum. It takes a while to start rolling, but then once it's going, it keeps going. It sounds like maybe that's somewhat similar for you.
Yeah, it rolls and then it hits a little snag.
Yeah, you gotta keep pushing.
And you gotta get around it. But it does keep, once you're at a certain point, it does build a little bit faster.
Right. And whether you're breaking news or providing analysis or putting naughty words in headlines, it does sound like all of it's about having more of a voice. Being more, voicey is kind of a term of art you hear in the media world. It's not just raw, straight news. It's not a news alert about some breaking story. It's is it point of view? Is that the right phrase for it? How do we describe that?
Even beyond a voice, it's a different way of writing. So the whole idea of the inverted pyramid is something I bet none of us do up here. And where you just sort of have a lead, the nut graph, the quote that
you'll bury a scoop in paragraph 6 sometimes.
Sometimes, but people will read it, and it's just kind of like it's just a different way of. I keep using this phrase, but like we're building a community, and so that's sort of we talk to people in a different way when we're trying to do that.
Well, about community, Julianne, you're talking about doing live events already within your first 4 or 5 months. What does that bring to this? What is that part of the entrepreneurial story?
I mean, it is actually building, providing something extra for our subscribers, but also it is this community idea is something that drives us, both because it's so implicit in music, which we cover all culture through the lens of, but also, it just, we've only done 2 events at this point, because again, we've only been around for 5 months. But what we're seeing is there's this real desire of our subscribers and readership to actually interact with us, interact with each other, to be around like-minded music nerds, to discover new types of music, and it's been really gratifying, and I can't help but feel it has something to do with the fact that everyone is constantly on their computer or their phones at this point, and there's this desire for human-to-human interaction.
Right.
But I know that Hellgate does events also. Are you finding that vibe, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, we have not yet, or maybe ever, approached events as a moneymaker, but or as a direct moneymaker in the way that a lot of media outfits do. But we do them to cultivate community, and yes, I think we find that people are excited to meet us in real life. They're excited to meet other people who appreciate what we're doing, because part of what we're doing is sort of covering the city with on the one hand with like an aggressive hostility and skepticism to power, which people who appreciate that like really appreciate it, and they appreciate finding each other through us. And we love New York, and so I think people like seeing the city through the lens of our work, and that translates to a kind of community that we're glad to cultivate.
Yeah. I think without making us all sound like old fogies, I think we're all kind of mid-career journalists. Like, none of us are just starting out. It's not our first job in the industry. Does what we've talked about up here apply to people who might be 21, 24, 27 and trying to start for the first time in this business? Can you graduate from college and put up a Substack and just start right away? What do y'all think about that?
I was a terrible reporter at 25. I had a lot of really good editors. I had a lot of good reporters that I worked with that I learned from.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine getting to where I am now without having people read my copy and edit my copy time and time and time again.
Yeah, I think I went to journalism school, and so I had that kind of foundation, and then I interned at NBC News, and I had these more traditional newsroom jobs, and I think that actually helped set me up for this moment, because it gave me that foundational training. Yeah, the same thing. If I was allowed to just run free at 25, I don't think the results would have been very good.
We'd have fun though, wouldn't we?
Yes, certainly.
Well, but somebody give me the counter argument. Give me the fresh out of school and you're gonna start a startup. No?
I mean, I ran free in the early blog era.
Yeah, heck yeah.
And some might say that was a mistake, but I think that you can do it. I do think there is so much to be said for learning from others. Obviously, being edited is crucial. Learning other skills, and I think that newsrooms are really important in that sense. But I think, at least in the culture space, some of the biggest Substacks are, or newsletters in general, are from 21, 22-year-olds, and they're great. And maybe they're not necessarily reporting scoops, but they're certainly interviewing important cultural figures and such. So I think that I don't know. I think people should go for it.
Well, and we're all kind of text-based, Like, I mean, I'm on TV sometimes, but what we're doing is mostly newsletters and articles in that form. I was talking to a YouTube creator last night who, I think she's like 26, 27. She's making a run of it, She's able to send out things on Substack, create videos on many platforms. She got a book deal out of it as a result. She got a talent agent. So you can be like a content creator and do what we're describing also, and be an innovator in journalism. That's another way to go. But I want to hit on this editor point before we open it up for questions, because that's one of the first things you did, Oliver. First thing, as soon as you had enough money, you hired an editor. Yeah. Why? You could have banked that money, you could have done anything with it. Why was it important for you to hire an editor? Because that gets to what we're talking about up here.
A couple reasons. I think editors are very important, obviously. So having someone look over your copy, particularly if it is sensitive, if you're reporting a scoop that might change someone's life or affect someone. It's good to have second eyes on everything. Unfortunately, ChatGPT is not quite good enough to replace editors quite yet.
Very true.
It's also good to have an editor because editors do a lot more than edit, right? Yeah. They're your mind meld. They they help you come up with story ideas. We did a story today about Fox News selling T-shirts that are made in China, or not China, sorry, Central America, while railing against the tariffs. And I didn't come up with that story idea. John was my editor. Was we were talking about them, and we're like, oh, well, he was like, I wonder if they have a shop.
Where are their clothes from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
Good question.
I don't know where that was, but
You lost your mic pack, but I think it's still on, so you're okay.
Well, good.
So the point is,
so
it makes you better.
It makes you better, and also, if I'm sick, theoretically, John can fill in for me. So
You're superhuman, but if you're ever sick,
On 1.2, we're talking about can you do it out of, I think the thing we haven't talked about is what the benchmark of success is. So for some people, a benchmark of success, particularly out of college, might be making $50,000 a year. For me, that would be very difficult at this point in my life. And I think when I talk to people, it ranges from newspaper reporters to television stars. And television stars, as you know, make quite a lot more money than someone who's a newspaper reporter. And so filling the pay, the hole or whatever of a corporate cable news television job with a Substack is going to be a lot more challenging than if you are a local news reporter or even a print reporter at the Washington Post. The disparity in pay there is so vast. I think that's, you got to take that into consideration. So what the benchmark of success is, like anyone I think could theoretically make it independent. It's just, what kind of lifestyle do you want? What do your bills look like? Do you have a family? Do they need health insurance? Like there's a lot of other factors that come into play when we talk about can you make it independent.
Nick, I think you were jumping in on the
No,
other
yeah,
part.
I was just going to say back to the editor question.
Yeah.
I think the unacknowledged thing here is that there are fewer and fewer jobs available to people coming into the business right now where they could avail themselves of that kind of mentorship, learning, and editors. And so, I think the challenge for people entering the field and the challenge in terms of like the future of journalism from a systemic perspective is like figuring out where do you get that kind of collaborative process absent like a corporate newsroom where you can learn all those skills.
Yeah, and I will say having I mentioned being out at CNN for a while then going back. When I was a freelancer, I learned like what outlets would edit me well, what would actually make my stories better, make them sing, and what outlets as a freelancer just put up whatever garbage I filed, right? Like you can find those editors, you can find those relationships in lots of different ways, but it is a challenge. It can be difficult. Let's see the fun part now, the audience questions. Let's see who wants to go first in the audience. We're going to ask to have you line up, right, Kate, on both sides here. We've got 2 microphones on 2 sides, so line up on the stairs.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Thomas Benjamin. My question is for Julianne. So I noticed that hearing things makes a promise of no algorithms. And so algorithms and media consumption typically, essentially what's happening is that information is being prioritized via machine learning. And so, rather coincidentally, corporate-owned music media is often referred to as the machine by recording artists. How does hearing things restore democracy to music consumers?
Wow. I'm not sure if we're restoring democracy to consumers, but, a thing that we obviously rail against is this idea that corporations are placing, particularly with Spotify, but other sort of streaming music services, prioritizing, you're being fed the music that you hear. And so what we hope to do is to find music outside of that algorithm or choose to cover music that you may not necessarily hear because they're not getting surfaced. Did that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
precisely.
We do that by just going out and talking to other people who are listening to music and digging really far into weird rabbit holes of the internet. And, you know, I mean, I think obviously we do cover certain artists that the algorithm will feed to you, just because we're not trying to be, we're fans of that, some types of music in that way, and we're not trying to be like totally culturally arcane, but but our goal as journalists and as music fans is to step outside that cycle of what you're being told to listen to, basically. Does that make sense?
Interesting.
Yeah, based on your response, I would say that's restoring democracy. So you're going out to people and figuring out what they want.
It sounded big time, like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I can take credit.
You have a new tagline, I think.
Yeah.
That's
Seems
great.
like a big statement, but thank you.
That's great.
Thank
All right,
you.
over here.
Hi, my name is Andy. I'm an intern for the Center for Communication. One of my questions is, what advice would you give to emerging journalists trying to incorporate engagement techniques without compromising journalistic standards like verification, accountability, and fairness?
All right, engagement techniques for your brands, for your startups.
Well, I would say that for me, social media and at the moment, Blue Sky is almost half of what my business is. I break a lot of stories on there first. People see my stories there, not mostly because of following me there, not because they're subscribers. So I think that you shouldn't be afraid of unconventional ways of breaking news. No one way is more legitimate than another. And I think that just interacting with writers that you respect and that you like, and giving them feedback, telling them that you like it, it's just a good way to learn how to be in conversation with other writers and to let them know that you appreciate their work. And you never know, in the future, if you are applying for an internship or looking to place a story, you have to sow those relationships, and you never know when it will come in handy.
Got to fish where the fish are. It's a version of that on social media. Let's go over here.
Thank you. My name is Zaria, and I'm a student at St. Francis College studying communication arts. I'm also an event intern here for the Center for Communication. My question is, what role does social media play in your engagement strategies? How do you handle it being competition and keeping people's attention spans, as well as ensuring that your exclusive information is, kept exclusive and not being used by other parties?
This reminds me of what I noticed with you, John. Sometimes you don't give it all away on Twitter or X or anything. You make people actually read it.
Yeah, and there are a lot of aggregators that are out there, so you don't keep it goes out beyond our paywall anyway. I find X is really kind of a disaster area for a lot of reporters.
Wait, does anybody up here still use X besides me?
I use X.
Okay, yeah. Oliver's been telling me to quit for years. I just can't.
And I'm just not getting the feedback on Blue Sky, which is sort of keeping me on X a little bit. But now, instead of engaging as much as I used to on social, I use it as a megaphone to broadcast out my stories.
Yeah. Oliver, you use Threads a lot also as a megaphone.
Well, I mean, I still do. I don't, we had a story a couple weeks ago about why people are still on Threads. I think it's kind of becoming a dead space, like a second, everyone kind of posts stuff. I don't know if everyone's still posting on Threads. I
still post there too.
It's sort of like a second
looking for a new X and not finding it.
Yeah, it's sort of like a second dumping ground. Like I copy and paste my Blue Sky or whatever we call those onto Threads.
That's exactly what I do.
But I don't think anyone's primarily focusing on Threads anymore.
But you use Blue Sky to say subscribe if you like this article.
We do, and that's helpful at times. I think we refuse to be on X, and so that probably makes it a little more challenging to reach certain audiences, quite frankly. But I think, just ethically speaking, we wouldn't want to be on that platform. In terms of,
he's just hitting me. You don't realize it, but that's a shot.
You can get off tonight.
Oliver thinks I'm fascist adjacent by being on X.
Well, you're helping, the Elon Musk MAGA swamp by keeping the lights on.
This
Anyway.
is actually an intervention for you, Brian.
Yeah, exactly. every time I'm with Oliver, it comes back to whether I should be on X or not. That's true, actually.
In terms of like the social strategy, though, I actually don't understand the reasoning for breaking news on social and giving your content away for free. I think, if it's an imminent thing that's going to happen and I have no choice whatsoever, I suppose I will put it on some social media platform. But generally speaking, if it's going to hold for even 30 minutes, I think two things. One, it doesn't help really me with subscribers if I give it away for free. And so that's not going to help our business, which is going to ensure that we can keep doing the journalism. But outside that, I feel like we owe it to our subscribers to give it to them and not to give it to Elon Musk or whatever social media platform, Zuckerberg platform, or even the Blue Sky platform. Right. I feel like our subscribers should see it first. And so if we have the opportunity, we've been doing status alerts. Our name is Status. Status alerts is a fun, name for these things. So it's like a breaking news alert that I'll just write a few sentences and email it out to our audience. And I feel like that rewards the community that we're building by giving them the information first.
Right.
And it also can help drive subscriptions because if you want that information first, you have to subscribe.
Right.
And so I sometimes wish that I think everyone here probably wishes you could give away all the content you do for free. But unfortunately, to build a viable business that can continue doing journalism, you have to, lock things behind a paywall and think about the subscription strategy. And I don't actually see giving away content for free on social to be beneficial. I do think analysis is different. And analysis, we'll give away all day for free on social. But reporting, scoops, that's behind the paywall.
But I don't paywall anything, and it's just a completely different calculus for me. And I think we're coming from slightly different points of view or different experience levels. It's like you had a name at CNN, you were at this big place, whereas I felt like I really had to build respect, build a name for myself. And so for me, putting it on social media, casting a wider net, it helps reach more people. Keeping it siloed is actually harmful to my business. I want more people to know what I'm capable of. And that also it's created this sort of effect where people will see a story reported by another outlet, a day later and be like, that was on the Handbasket first. And they're very protective of me and of the publication. So that also creates more people who want to be a part of it, and that encourages people to become subscribers. And they're just paying to support me. They're not paying to get information. They can get it for free.
I think our audiences might be different too, which is what is maybe showing like this rift in subscriber behavior.
Well, you want every person at a television network to pay for status.
Well, yes, and elsewhere too. But yes, we want everyone in the media industry to pay for status.
A narrow inside crowd.
I don't know if it's a narrow inside crowd. I just noticed that when we do stories, we have 2 newsletters that go out for free every week on Saturday and Sunday, and those frankly just don't convert readers to subscribers. They just don't. Like they might be shared on Twitter or whatever. That's great. I'm happy that they were shared a lot, but they don't actually convert people when you look at the numbers at the end of the day. The numbers that the thing that really converts people from my standpoint or stats when we look at them is scoop behind paywall. Scoop behind paywall. That's what converts. Yeah. And like we might get like 1 or 2 readers who convert off of a free story, but like it's so tiny, and it's like and we do it just because we want to give away some content for free. Yeah. But really it's not a big conversion.
But I think this is informative.
tool.
I almost think, Marisa, you described more of a membership versus a subscription, right? If you don't have to pay, you're choosing to be part of it, right?
Yes.
I don't know, is that the right, was there any better word than that? Like, it
I
sounds more like an NPR model, where you're donating even though you can get it for free.
Yeah, NPR.
Yeah, it's an NPR model. Yeah. It's good to hear different models up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people want to support what I do, and so I think it's also very much about me personally, and we didn't get into that too much, but about the idea of a personal brand and wanting to support a specific journalist rather than supporting an overall publication is something that's very different, at least in my case.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's go over to the side.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Latrice Davis. I am a former journalist and a longtime news consumer. Earlier this evening, I heard a few of you talk about just starting out posting stories, and now you're doing events. So my question to anyone who wishes to answer it is, how do you plan on avoiding the fate of Carlos Watson? Thank you.
Wow. Well, our events are quite small. Yeah, I mean, he's the Aussie guy, right? If anyone has any. So Aussie Media, basically, they started out, and maybe you can actually illuminate this for.
There were all
right.
these allegations of fraud at this media company's company. He was convicted of this fraud, and partly it was because he was out there trying to grow quickly. He was trying to raise money. He was trying to fundraise, trying to make this business model bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a really different approach than what we're talking about, I think, which is kind of more bootstraps.
Yeah.
You one subscriber at a time, one member at a time.
Yeah, exactly. To be clear, we're not making a lot of money on these events. We're talking at Trans Pecos in Ridgewood, you know, or like, there's a really great listening tea bar called Silence Please on Grand in Manhattan, if you guys, but you know, so it's really about like starting small and growing, not like, you know, getting
By not more than you can
massive,
chew, et cetera. Yeah.
We're not trying to be Coachella. I think it's just like a small, and I don't think we will ever be Coachella, because I don't think any of us want that. I think it's just a little.
And I also think more broadly, the last 10 years digital media have showed us what happens when some of these companies, BuzzFeed being a famous example, try to get really, really big. Vice is an even better example. Taking on too many investors, taking on too much money, and then imploding spectacularly. All right, let's go over here to this side.
Hello, my name is Camila Miranda. I'm a senior at Lehman College, and I'm also an event intern for Center for Communication. And my question is, how do you decide which communities or voices to engage with for a given story? And how do you ensure that process remains fair and representative?
Nick's thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is like one of the central questions of journalism, right? Yeah, I think that is a constant discipline that we all have to practice of sort of asking ourselves who are we talking to, and who are we asking questions to, and who are we reporting for, and you know, and are we framing that as broadly as we can? That's a very general answer. I don't know. Does someone have a more specific answer?
Anyone else?
Yeah, and I think using your platform to uplift the voices of people who don't necessarily have that voice, helping people who are marginalized and tell stories that maybe wouldn't have been told otherwise is, at least for me, something that I take really seriously, and I try to look at things through that lens.
Let's go over to this side.
Thank you for your time. So y'all are all at the point of trying to convert people into subscribers. So your brand's already established and your site's probably established. My question is, how are you getting people to your site before you can even convert them to subscribers? I'm familiar with SEO and the fact that, you know, the more articles you have on your site, the more authority your site has. I know you just mentioned social media blasting, but aside from that, how are you attracting people?
How do people even know you exist in the first place?
Well, I'll answer that first. I think one, SEO is kind of dead. I mean, I don't know how much SEOs anyone's getting here, but like unless you're like CNN or like a major outlet, like those are the ones that pop up first. Like it's actually deeply frustrating me because we'll break a lot of news and then I'll Google it and it's like the New York Post and Daily Mail are getting a lot of traffic off of our story and it's ours.
They'll just rewrite his scoop.
It's not even
take
on
the
the top 20 or whatever.
Right.
So it's just a Google problem. I don't know if anyone has a solution. I'm open to hearing it. But I think the way you actually, a lot of people find out about us is one, social media. Blue Sky tends to be for us the big driver on social, but breaking news. Because when you break news, like we had a story last night, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was something that people rewrote.
The press pool.
The press pool, yes.
I remember because I wanted to break it.
We wrote about the press pool. And how the White House is actually censoring some of the pool reports that are supposed to be distributed by the White House, where the president's doing and his movements, and the White House is choosing not to send out some unflattering ones. to the list that they're supposed to send it to. Anyway, that ended up getting aggregated by a bunch of outlets today. So and they all cite us, and that links back to status. And a lot of times, a decent amount of our referral traffic ends up coming from those people who are aggregating our story, even though they are taking the bulk of the traffic. Some of the people that go to that site, they want to read the original story, the original source, and they come to status.
You also...
So breaking news, I think that I cannot stress this enough. Breaking news is what really moves the needle for me and for status, and it's what gets attention.
And breaking news in the stories, that's all that we can actually control. So in terms of your question, that's for Puck has somebody that does social media. Puck also has people that go out and get email lists, and we're able to sort of market to them. So that's really sort of back office stuff that I think all of us find to be excruciatingly boring. But all that we can control is getting out good stories, break news, or have really good analysis.
Yeah.
We don't have guys doing that for us. We have to we have to answer your question for ourselves. And I think we're trying and so far mostly succeeding to train people to go to our homepage like it's 2002.
Wow. People go to your homepage.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which to the extent that we're able to keep doing that, that's great, because that means Blue Sky can go the way of X tomorrow, and Google can do what it's doing, and we they come to our homepage. There are no intermediaries. So that's our ambition.
Interesting. All right, let's go over to this side. Got a few more?
Hi, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Pinello, and I'm a senior at NYU studying media culture and communications. So as a young, fresh journalist trying to break into the scene, I really appreciate you guys coming in this evening. So my question is about how you balance accessibility with the subscription model. You guys got into it a little bit, but I was just wondering how you try to make collaborative efforts with other individual entrepreneur journalists while you're still keeping your own subscribers, if that makes sense.
Well, I was going to say, I emailed or texted Marisa a couple days, I don't know, was it last week? And we're going to do we've been doing this with other newsletters as well, where we'll do an ad for someone else's newsletter in our newsletter, and they'll do an ad in their newsletter, and it's a nice swap. And if there's decent overlap, or I think there's decent overlap, we ask people if they're interested in doing that. We've done a few so far, and it's beneficial, it seems like, for both parties, because there's a lot of cross-pollination that can happen. And I think that one thing YouTubers have been very good at has been often doing collabs, right? And in the newsletter world, there isn't that infrastructure necessarily yet, but we're trying to certainly create something like that by doing these ad for ad swaps.
That's cool.
Yeah. Hellgate and Hearing Things have also done some collabo jams. Yeah, we've swapped stories when they were New York relevant music stories. So that was exciting.
Yeah.
But that also answers the prior question about how do people know who you are, right? You're already reading Hellgate and you discover Hearing Things,
right,
or vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Trying to, there's a small ecosystem of worker-owned publications that kind of all try to help each other. I think worker-owned collective publications.
Yeah.
Similarly to the newsletter space, I think.
Yeah. All right, we got 3 more questions. Let's see if we can get to all of them right here.
Hi, thank you guys so much. I'm a senior journalism student at Hofstra on Long Island, excuse me. So much flack for that, guys. So I wanted to ask how you guys establish credibility as freelance journalists, as people not under legacy media in the face of known huge institutions, like getting into the Yankees clubhouse, Mets clubhouse, or the White House, something like that. Thank you.
I think you have to hold yourself to a really high standard. It helps to have lawyers and fact checkers and editors screening things for you. But when you're doing it on your own, when you're your own boss, you just have to figure it out, and you have to trust your gut. And that has really gotten me pretty far, knowing when a story doesn't feel complete or where I don't feel like it's fully confirmed yet. Because I'm a person just like people at bigger institutions. And yes, it is helpful to have multiple eyes on something rather than just relying on myself. But I think it's a lot of it's a matter of confidence and trusting in your ability to know when a story is legit, trusting in your source, and taking all the steps to verifying a story that anyone, whether at a huge publication or on their own, would take. It's actually the same basic skill, the same muscle, with just slightly fewer guardrails to protect you.
That word credential is interesting because a student newspaper, is a credential. Having a Substack now is a credential. A few years ago, it was kind of uncomfortable for people like me to credit a Substack, if they broke a story. And it still is weird once in a while. You still have to fight once in a while to get people to credit you.
Sometimes outlets don't like
But
crediting.
I think it's getting more comfortable. It's getting more common. Like, no matter what the outlet is, it's recognized as legit. I think, that idea of credentials is changing in this independent media world where so many people are striking out on their own, I think.
I also do think that public relations officials, particularly, respond to people, and I hate to be a broken record, but that break news. And that reporters, very young reporters, if you think about someone like Caitlin Collins, who's the 9 p.m. anchor on CNN now. When she started, she was, 20-something, just out of college.
Yep.
And she made a name for herself by breaking news. And eventually, or Josh Darcy, an all-star reporter now at the Journal, was at the Washington Post. He made a name for himself by breaking news, and they were very young, and they didn't have much a huge name at the time.
Right.
But they were persistent, relentless, and they worked harder than other people, and they broke news. And 6 months in, you're like, oh, that Josh Darcy guy, he just knows everything. He's just constantly breaking news. I have to respond to this guy. I want to get coffee with him because I want to have a relationship because I need to. And so, again, I
and not just the PR people, but the executives, right?
And the
guy that
sources.
now owns CNN reached out to me when I was 1 year out of college, wanting to get lunch with me because I was a brand new kid writing stories at the New York Times, but I was working on stories nobody else was writing. So he wanted to get to know me. 20 years later, he's my boss's boss's boss, right? Those relationships form. I think they start to form because who's this new guy?
Yeah.
Who's this guy breaking stories? Who's this guy getting? It has that effect, I think. Let's go back over here, this side.
Hi. You all talk a lot about scoops. My question is, as independents, how do you find them? Do you find them, or do they come to you?
Scoops?
Wait, how do you break? Where these scoops come from, Oliver?
The scoops come from a relentless networking and constant contact with as many people as you can be in contact with.
Okay, that sounds really hard. Make it a little easier. It also comes from just looking around and being like, hey, why is that happening?
Yeah, and then
who
asking
is that
questions.
over there?
But I think there's you don't need to be a brand name or whatever to break news. I was thinking the other day, if I were reporting on TikTok and I were a journalist, I would go on LinkedIn and search TikTok and look at everyone that works at TikTok, and I'd message 500 people. And 490 of them probably won't respond. But 10 of them might. And if you have 10 sources at TikTok, you're now one of the best source reporters at TikTok in the country. Just the way it works. And
he's right.
That's going to take you maybe a few days to hit 500 inboxes or whatever on LinkedIn. You might have to buy LinkedIn Premium. But you're going to have some sources at TikTok. And if an old staff, it doesn't often take high-level sources. Sometimes, an old staff email will go out. We did a story last week. Bob Iger jumped on the ABC News call and talked about tariffs and blasted Trump's tariffs.
Oh, that was a great
He was in
story.
front of hundreds of people doing this. No one reported it except us. And it didn't take high-level sources to have that information. Hundreds of people heard it because anyone on ABC News was on that call. And it just took a few people that I know who are, frankly, that texted
Gossips.
me.
They're gossips.
And I had a story on my hands. And so I think that, and that gets executives, because now Bob Iger's paying attention, where did this come from? And then they're interested, right? And so I think sourcing and breaking news, unfortunately, a lot of it doesn't just come your way. I wish that would be the case. Sometimes it does. It just usually doesn't. But it's hitting the pavement. It's not really sexy or whatever. It's just like messaging people and like staying in contact and building relationships and human relationships with the people that you do come into contact with.
There's also conceptual, go ahead.
All that is true, and nobody breaks more news than Oliver here. But like Brian said, gossip. That's always how I describe it. You just talk to people.
Yeah.
You talk and you gossip, and sometimes I always describe it as a game of telephone, which probably ages me a little bit, and then you find I got this great scoop today that NBC was going to get the ESPN's Major League Baseball rights, except for it's totally wrong, and so I put a lot of effort into getting that story, and there's no there, so it's just kind of like you hear things, you just have to vet them and work around. But
and just to piggyback on something that Oliver said, it's not about going to the CEO of a company or the leader of an organization. A lot of times it's about establishing contacts with people who are lower on the food chain, who are actually in the trenches doing whatever the work is. And those are the people that are more likely to speak with you because they're not conditioned to guard information and frankly they're working in a different pay grade. It's just a completely different calculus. So I think
disgruntled employees are our best friends.
Yes. Especially.
And there's a lot of those right now.
Yes. And scoop kind of begets scoop. Once you get one, especially for at least in my experience, dealing with federal employees right now and covering the federal employment and the dissolving of the whole thing, people know that I had this scoop, so I can get out this other scoop, and they trust me with that information. And so once you kind of get a couple, it snowballs a bit.
God, there's so many untold stories right now inside our federal government.
Yeah.
There are literally several million, right? You think about how many people are suffering right now, how many people are being fired or being threatened or being intimidated. Literally, there are several million stories to write.
Yeah.
And there's barely any journalists to write them.
Yeah, I mean,
so there's so many opportunities.
My inbox is clogged constantly.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest stresses I have is that I can't tell every story, and that I feel like I'm letting people down because I just simply don't have the bandwidth to tell every single one. And I don't ever want anyone to feel like their story is less important than someone else's.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could have a whole newsroom
So
just
many.
covering Fed
Let's
stories.
launch a startup. There's also conceptual scoops, right? I mean, I'm sure we all have Google alerts for our names up here, right? The Google alerts that I get for my name are often things I wrote months ago, okay, that are like conceptual scoops, things that I happened to say it before somebody else said it. And that's through observation, right? It's through being really obsessed with a topic, trying to pay attention to it, trying to notice things before others notice them. And that doesn't need a whistleblower source necessarily, but it means connecting dots before others connect them. We have 2 more minutes. Let's try to get 2 more questions before we wrap up.
Hi, I'm Valerie. I'm a student at Baruch, and I'm studying journalism. And I don't really get the impression that people get into journalism because work-life balance is particularly high on their priority list. That being said, for those of you who are, establishing new companies and often coming from companies that abused their workers, when you don't have a lot of money coming in because you're very early on, how are you trying to take care of yourselves and your workers and not perpetuate the problems in larger media companies?
That is such a good question. Yeah, I mean, that's something that Hellgate has, we've had many long conversations about that. Yeah, it's about, one of the things that worker ownership allows us is, it really centers the fact that our primary and indeed only asset is ourselves and our well-being, and as journalists, in order to do the work, we've got to be doing okay in a full spectrum way. And so we've just been really deliberate about building policies that are friendly to us. We at a time when it was probably not the most financially prudent move, we gave ourselves a really like as soon as we could, we gave ourselves a really perfectly respectable healthcare plan. And you know, we probably could have grown a little faster if we had plowed that money into hiring another staffer or something. But you know, we were trying to sort of begin as we wish to proceed and build a place that takes care of itself.
Let's take this last question here. No pressure, but you're our last question, so I'm sure it'll be outstanding.
Hello, my name is Melanie Harris, and I'm a recent grad, non-traditional. I'm not, you know, in my 20s or 30s, but I'm trying to break into the journalism field. As a matter of fact, I applied for a few of, you know, the places, you know, NBC, CBS, but I also write on Substack, you know, and I was just thinking, is that the same thing like you know, freelancer journalists, like what y'all are doing up there? You know, I'm independent. Is it the same kind of thing, getting an audience and a community to you know, listen to, you know, read your writings? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, I think one day you're a freelancer, independent journalist, whatever you want to call it, and the next you have your own business. There's no kind of clear break. I mean, I think once you start charging for subscriptions, I think that is a certain milestone that might, you know, differentiate. Obviously, that makes it a business. But if you have an audience and you're publishing, you are an independent journalist or reporter or writer, whatever word you want to use. It's sort of like a self-defining thing. It's not something that someone else defines for you.
Okay, I haven't, you know, it's like freelance, it's like free. I haven't, you know,
Yeah, it still counts as clips. You
Yeah.
know, when you're applying for those jobs, you can still send what you write on your Substack, and those are your clips.
right,
you
because
know?
I was listening to what he said, that it's like credentials, you know, and that's what I've been trying to use, you know, on my resume and everything.
And you're building a readership of people who you know come and read your stuff. And you know, when that number is big enough, some small fraction of those people might be willing to pay you for it. And so you know, you can do the math.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for the questions. Thank you all for the answers. Real quick, where do people sign up? Status.news.
Status.news.
For Oliver. Where do people sign up? Where can people go read?
Hearingthings.co.
.co, all right.
www, don't forget that. Thehandbasket.co. I need to fix my domain a little bit.
Oh, okay. There we go.
We're at hellgatenyc.com.
Great.
And puck.news.
There we go. There we go. All right, thank you all, and let's bring Camilla back up to wrap it up.
Thank you so much. Let's give another big round of applause to our amazing panelists, so knowledgeable. And we hope to see you back again on April 28th for our last panel of the spring season.